Welcome all. I'm joined today by Good Day LA's Araxia Garabedian. Araxia, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Happy to be with you.
So Araxia, to start off, you are very much connected with your Armenian roots and your Armenianness. Where did that come from exactly? You're from Gyumri. Was it your family? Was it that you were in a place where a lot of Armenians were living? What do you think instilled that Armenianness in you?
That's a great question. And I think it's one of those that's tough to answer because I was born in Gyumri and my family and I came to the United States in 1990. So I was 7.5 years old. So I was quite young. So I quickly adapted to American way of life. So I grew up Americanized a great deal. And we did not grow up I did not live in an Armenian community. We lived predominantly surrounded by Americans. So I wasn't really exposed to the Armenian schools or the dance teams or any of those classes that so many people are fortunate enough to take advantage of because there's so much of that here in Glendale and Hollywood, and it's wonderful, but I didn't have access to that. So I grew up surrounded by Americans. So I don't know other than to just say that it just within me, it just there, in my DNA, I have this strong pull and connection to Hayastan. I've always had it. And, what's interesting is throughout the years, it hasn't diminished. It has actually intensified, which is even surprising to me. The last time I was in Armenia was in 2006. It's been quite a long time, but it doesn't take away from what I feel when I think of Armenia. I just get this overwhelming feeling of emotion. Actually, just a few minutes ago, before you and I joined one another, I was watching this video I just posted on the Eternal Nation Foundation. They put this great piece together about one of the wounded soldiers who lost a limb, and they provided him with a prosthetic. And so much of the story is about him and the scenery of Armenia and the music. And I'm watching this, and I'm sitting on set in a commercial break, and I'm getting emotional just listening to him speak just in Armenian and watching the beautiful scenery of Hayastan. And I, to this day, am surprised at my reaction. And I can't explain it other than to say being Armenian is just a feeling that I can't describe. It's just something I feel. It's just something that is there.
And oftentimes I've noticed people here, when foreigners, sometimes even non-Armenian foreigners, say, well, Armenia has a very big diaspora, millions and millions of Armenians across the world. And some people here will mention that not all of those Armenians are really instilled with their Armenianness, and they have multiple identities, and that's all compatible. Do you think that it's almost a balancing act to, like yourself, growing up in America, but with Armenian roots? Aren't the two compatible? And also, is it also about personal interest as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a balancing act. Speaking for myself, I'm always, I've always felt kind of torn, right? Because I have my foundation with my Armenian roots, traditions, cultures, morals, values, all of the family dynamics instilled in me. And at the same time, I'm growing up in the United States, and I'm surrounded by majority of my friends and coworkers who are not Armenian. And so there's beautiful things where you're able to take the best of both worlds and mesh them together, and you get this wonderful product of who you are. But there are moments where I do feel like this struggle of identity, where I'm this, but I'm also that. And I feel this, but I also feel that. And why do I feel this? And why can't it just be simple? There's so many complex factors. I feel like just being Armenian, there's lots of complexity in just us as a nation and as people, especially, last year with everything that was happening, which I know we'll get into. But I think that the diaspora, even in the last year, I think a lot of people discovered their calling and their wanting to be back in Armenia or just have something to do with Armenia, that perhaps they might not have felt that before. Everything that happened in 2020 really invigorated that in people. It woke them up almost. It was like a slap in the face. And I see many people taking an interest, becoming more active, which I think is great. So, for every bad thing that happens, there's a little bit of good thing that comes out of it. But for me, I would say the biggest struggle is even I speak English most of the time, unless I'm with my family. And sometimes I worry that I'm losing the language, or I think about how am I going to pass the language on to my kids. I force my older daughter to do these Armenian Zoom classes with a teacher in Armenia, actually, Tutag. It's a wonderful program. But, these are 30-minute classes twice a week. They're great. It's better than nothing. But still, it's a struggle to just, I won't answer her back if she speaks English. I'm like, say the same thing in Armenian. I have to constantly push and struggle to get her to do so. And then I think, well, what happens when she grows up? What happens to her children and her children's children? And when I think about it, it seems it's almost a sad commentary of us as people, where we've all been dispersed all over the world. And as much as we fight to keep who we are, as time goes on, that can get lost unless you really make a point to fight to make it survive. And that is all of our duties.
And that's interesting that you mentioned the experience as a parent, because some people speak almost like it's easy to teach your children these things, but it's actually a lot of effort. I remember even myself rebelling against my mother, who was trying to instill Armenianness in me. So do you think, what's the role of the parent? Is it actually quite a intense and quite a heavy task?
I'm trying to figure out the best way to do this. Sometimes I feel like if I'm too forceful, it might backfire on me, and maybe just to step back and let her to on her own gravitate towards it, because you know how you are as a child. And I was like this as a child. When you force something on me, immediately my natural reaction is to say no to something or back away from it. So I am trying to figure it out the best I can. Sometimes it hurts my feelings, I have to tell you, when, the response will be like, oh, I don't want to say it in Armenian, or Armenian is boring, or why do I have to do this? And, there's that. And it really hurts my feelings. I have to remind myself that, you're dealing with a 5-year-old, and the best thing you can do is brush it off. And, I tell her all the time, I'm like, your friends would love to be able to speak another language. Do you know what a cool name you are? Let me tell you a little bit about your name and the history of your name. So I try to make things interesting in that way, but it's hard. I mean, even if I do her homework in English, we're reading a book in English, after each sentence, I then say what we read in Armenian. So it's on me to put in the effort. And sometimes it's tiring, but, if it's important to you, and it is important to me, then you just have to put in the time and the effort.
And then we're also seeing lately non-Armenian appreciation for all things Armenian. I'm wondering, your friends and your colleagues in LA, are you seeing any of that? And on top of that, how do you think they reacted to, for example, the revelation that Artsakh was being invaded? And I think a lot of Armenians were taking that very personally. What was that like, interacting with non-Armenian people?
Well, in Los Angeles, as you know, there's a huge Armenian community. So more people are exposed to what Armenia is and Armenians than otherwise they would be. So there is that. But when the war broke out, most people, even though they might know what Armenian is, they were unaware of the history of what's happening in Artsakh and why it matters and where is Artsakh, and you're saying there's a war in Armenia, but it's called something else and someone else is in charge. There was so much confusion, right? So trying to break it all down and explain this to people was difficult. And then on top of that, you have to explain why it matters to the average viewer here who's not Armenian. Why do they care? Why do they care about something that's happening so many miles away that you're even having a hard time explaining what's going on? And it's geographically so far removed from them, a place they will never visit likely ever in their lives. So it was a lot of pressure, and it was very stressful to try to convey the importance of telling that story. So that's one aspect. The other point that you're making, it's so great because all of my followers, I'll say on social media, are so engaged, and the coworkers I have are so supportive that, even my producers, whenever there's anything that comes up that's Armenian related story or issue, they'll incorporate it into the newscast. Or I have viewers all the time sending me articles or something they come across that has to do with Armenia and say, "Hey, Araxia, I thought of you." And that is so gratifying to know that they thought of you and they made the connection between you and Armenia. And it's become this normal thing where they talk about Armenia as if it's, something like, I'll say Italy, where everyone knows what Italy is and everyone wants to visit Italy. And it's something that most people are familiar with. But it feels good to know that you being here and doing topics and stories and kind of giving the Armenians attention and a voice has reflected really nicely, and it's paying off. It's paying off because people are recognizing what this little country is.
And could that also be due to changes in the Armenian community in the United States? A lot of people here are noticing, for example, that the Armenian community in America is getting more educated, it's getting more affluent, it's getting more successful. Are you noticing any of that? And on top of that, you see movie credits now where it's sometimes difficult to find a non-Armenian name. Teams involved with NASA where it's difficult to find that there's no Armenian name. This actually in the future could be a very important constituency for Armenian interests going forward. Can you speak a bit to that?
Absolutely. I think it's funny you brought up the movie thing, because I think we all at one point, we were guilty of watching the movie credits and waiting to see an Armenian name. And when it would happen, you wanted to rewind or pause or point it out or shout and say, "Hey, look." And now you're right. It's becoming much more common. I think that's a reflection on, obviously in many ways, the population is growing of the diaspora. So sometimes that can be viewed as a bad thing because people are leaving Armenia and they're going elsewhere. So then you think about how you're going to another country, you're working hard, you're becoming a productive member of society, but you're also not in your own country doing the work, right? So sometimes I think about that. And that's where the importance of always remembering where you're from and going back to help comes into play. And what I'm noticing is so much of the diaspora that is successful in whatever field they are, they're taking an interest in using that skill set, somehow getting involved with an organization or them on their own to do something for the Armenian people, whether it's working, whatever the field is, film production, music production, engineering, technology. These people are taking these skill sets and they're trying to get involved in Armenia by engaging with the youth and the younger generation. And I find that to be so important and so inspiring. Sometimes I think about, what can I do? Not just being involved in supporting different organizations, which I do, but even myself, for those who are interested in journalism, it would be nice to be able to go back or be involved in some kind of a program where those who are interested in the field of journalism then have a relationship with you and you're able to, teach them something or get involved in something of that sort. So that has definitely increased in the last 2 years, a year, especially as a result of the war. I think people realize the importance of not just living somewhere far away and once in a while going to visit as a tourist and maybe sending money once in a while to some organization, but actually taking an active role, a physically active role. You have to do more if you want Armenia to succeed. And it proved that in the last year, many people, like I said, it was like a slap in the face, a wake-up call, like a bucket of cold water was dumped on you where you came to life and you woke up and you're like, wait, it can't just be this nice little place that I call my homeland and motherland and have connections to. If it matters to me and it's important to me, I have to be much more engaged.
And that's the thing about being Armenian, is that it gives you the gift of giving you a unique perspective by having that experience of persecution, but as well the cold shower, as you mentioned. I finally want to ask as well, you and other Armenians are giving platforms to other Armenians to, have a voice, and one of them even being psychotherapist Edith Alaverdian, who I'm a big fan of. Why did you take this approach, and why is it important?
Well, we have guests on the show all the time discussing whatever the topic is, whether it's finance or mental health, or doctors discussing some kind of new research, or, COVID related, obviously now. We have these repetitive guests, and we have forever, and it's a pool of people you tap into. So then I started thinking, well, why aren't we using some of these Armenian people who are experts in their field? And social media, for everything that I hate about it, there's some good in it. You become friends and make connections like Edith, who I didn't know other than social media. And so many like her, where I started suggesting them to be guests on the show for segments, or doing stories about them, and making it so it was for a wider audience. It wasn't just so Armenian centric and focused, but you're having an Armenian represent whatever the topic is. I find that to be important, because I'm giving an opportunity to my community who otherwise would never have had this opportunity. And it feels really good. It feels really good to give them these opportunities to have exposure, and to share their thoughts, and why not? Everyone helps their own, right? So it's up to me to elevate people and give them a chance to showcase their talents.
And finally, any plans to come to Armenia in the future?
Absolutely. I had plans to come in 2018, and then I was expecting my second daughter, and my doctor didn't recommend it. And then afterward, I had plans again, and it didn't work out with everything that's happening in the world. So things need to quiet down a little bit. Believe me, you don't have children yet, but the idea of being on a long plane ride with 2 kids, I know people do it all the time. They're much braver than I am. You are much braver than I am. I get anxiety just thinking about it, but it is very important for me to bring my kids there, because I want to show them where I grew up. And, I think once they see that, it'll be easier for them to get excited about being Armenian, because then they'll have something tangible to see. So I definitely want to make it so it's not, people fly every couple of weeks. I know people who go back and forth. I've made it this big thing in my mind, where it's been so many years, and I think it has to be this big production, but it can be very simple. You just buy a ticket, you get on the plane, and you go. So I'm hoping to come back soon. I know so much has changed, especially Gyumri. The last time I was in Gyumri, people are still living in domiks, and things are still in rubble. I understand a lot of changes happened. So I would love to see that. Gyumri has a very special place in my heart. I also grew up in Yerevan. You too? I also grew up in Yerevan too, because my mother's side of the family had moved there when she'd gotten accepted into the university. So I spent my childhood in both places, but there's something very special about Gyumri. It's not as fancy, and it doesn't have as much going on as Yerevan, but I don't know. I almost prefer it to anything else.
Yeah, Gyumri is where I started my journey in Armenia, and it's got a very special place in my heart too. Well, Araxia, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on Subnet.